Greetings, brethren. This is our Bible prophecy news created with 100% offline generation. YHWH. We bring to your altar the latest news concerning this appointed day. We ask for your word upon these events. We begin with a question of peace and provision. We look to Mark chapter 6, verse 37, where the Master says to his disciples, "You give them to eat." The news brings heavy conflict, beginning within Gaza City, where airstrikes strike municipal police headquarters and seaside cafes, killing many people, including a teenage girl. This scene echoes the sorrow of Psalms 22, verse 16, in which the psalmist suffers with dogs surrounding him and hands and feet pierced, though without its spiritual dimension. Then we look to Syria and the Abu al Duhur airbase. Israel targets this site, and Lieutenant General Zami visits troops to state that hostile forces will not establish themselves along borders. This brings to mind Exodus chapter 14, verse 6, where the enemy makes ready his chariot and takes his compatriots with him, moving to confront. Next, we hear of judgment and legal proceedings. The IDF orders criminal investigations into the killing of 5-year-old Hind Rajab and her family, as well as the deaths of 15 rescue workers. This reflects the tension described in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 16, where Paul acknowledges being crafty and caught some with guile. Here, too, the result is a lack of clarity and a burden upon the community, much like one who enters a quarantined house will be unclean until sunset, as it is written in Leviticus 14, verse 46. We turn to the economic and leadership news. The United Arab Emirates halts trade with Iran after missiles are launched, and President Trump declares an economic D-Day. We see a judgment that Iran cannot trade without facing sanctions, though there is no verse for economic provision. Britain condemns the E1 settlement tender in the West Bank and demands it halt. The leadership speaks of Turkey and its military presence, but the drawn text does not carry these markers. There is no correspondence here. We say plainly that no drawn verse supports land tenders or international diplomatic friction. Finally, we see governance news regarding a Gaza peacekeeping force funded by the United States. However, neither Ezra nor Deuteronomy addresses such financial mechanisms. The drawn text carries governance and leadership, but it carries them thinly. The verdict is a strong anomaly with a 100% pass rate across all gates. The calculated confidence stands at 99.8%. We affirm this reading. We see the correlation state as a reading made, not a scored table. There is no answer for the political events in our sealed news digest. The text speaks of covenant and conflict, but it does not tell us what will happen next. The lead verses drawn in this altar of reception session were Mark chapter 6, verse 37, Psalms chapter 22, verse 16, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 16, Leviticus chapter 14, verse 46, Genesis chapter 20, verse 17, Exodus chapter 14, verse 6. 94 further verses were drawn in this session. This concludes today's interpretation at the altar of reception.